So thank you all. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. The purpose of today's hearing is to review the 2021 capital improvement budget as proposed by Mayor Ginther last week. My goal as Finance Chair is to make these investments open and accessible. Capital projects are some of the most direct ways we make investments in our neighborhoods and some of the most visible. We want to not only provide information on this budget here today, but also to receive feedback on neighborhoods. Early this year, in the before times, we reached out to area commissions and civic associations and asked for capital priorities in their areas. This local input is crucial on water and sewer projects, or repaving streets, or installing sidewalks, more recreation and parks facilities. All of these have a direct impact on the quality of life in our neighborhoods. We hear from our residents year-round about their capital needs in their neighborhoods, and the work that my team and the finance office did to try to do deliberate outreach with area commissions and civic associations was really an effort to help formalize and document the, I think, consistent outpouring of requests and prioritization that we hear from residents about their capital needs in their areas. So I'm really grateful to the area commissions and civic associations and everyone who volunteers their time to serve on them. Their work to provide us feedback, again, much earlier this year when we thought the capital budget would be more typical and different from what we see before us today. But nonetheless, we really appreciate that work they did. On the Finance Committee, we strive to improve our process every year, and we will continue to connect with residents and with these neighborhood groups to understand and highlight the feedback we receive from our neighborhoods. I also really want to thank Auditor Kilgore and Director Lombardi in the Finance Department and the staff from each department for their work on the budget that has been proposed and sits before us here today. It has been a challenging year, and the COVID-19 crisis did not spare much of anything, including our capital budget, which we usually consider in late spring. The economic crisis and resulting uncertainty around city revenue, as well as fiscal uncertainty, caused a significant delay. But Auditor Kilgore worked through this crisis to determine our capacity for this budget and how best to issue bonds to finance it. The departments all worked to prioritize their departmental needs in the capital budget. And out of all of this work, again, the budget before us today was proposed. At this hearing, each department will review their capital improvement budget, which we will hear at tonight's council meeting and table to consider for final passage next week. Thank you so much to my colleagues for joining this hearing. And before I turn over to directors, I just wanted a brief pause to see if any of my colleagues had specific initial remarks at the beginning of the hearing before we hear from directors. Okay. All right, great. So first up, always in the limelight in budget season, is Director Lombardi and the Finance Department.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. What I'll do is what we've done traditionally at these hearings. I will provide a high-level overview of the capital budget, sort of a prelude to the departments talking more specifically about the projects in more detail. I'll also, because as Councilmember Brown said, we'll explain the difference between the capital budget versus the operating budget, especially this year as we present a capital budget pretty much on the heels of what will be the operating budget later on in the week. So I wanted everybody to see the difference between the two budgets that will be presented in November this year, which is unusual, as most things in 2020 have been. So with that, I will get started, and also, if it's okay, Councilmember Brown, once I'm done with my high level, if I could move right into my budget, and then I can be the first director to give the more details. Is that
sounds good? And then at that point, council members can ask questions about either portion of your presentation.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank Mayor Ginther for his leadership and support, President Pro Tem Brown for her leadership as Finance Committee Chair, Council President Harden for leading our council through these tough times, other council members as well. Also, I'll be remiss if I didn't thank my colleague and friend, City Auditor Kilgore, for her help throughout this process, all my department colleagues and their staffs, for making some tough decisions this year to put this capital budget together. And last but not least, I want to thank my staff. Rob Newman, who has retired, was still instrumental in helping me put this budget together, even during retirement. And my trusted advisor, Kyle Seaver. I can't thank her enough for all the input she has given me and all the information that she has provided to me to get to this point today. The difference between the capital budget and the operating budget is really about what they represent as far as investments. The capital budget is really part of a 6-year plan called the Capital Improvement Plan, which is a planning document that includes the current year's budget. And the capital budget, or better known as the CIB, which Council will take up this evening, is the current year within that CIP. And it is used to invest in things like infrastructure, water and sewer projects, parks, streets. So it's more concrete, if I can say so, or gravel and things that you can touch and feel. The operating budget is definitely the day-to-day operations of our city, our payroll, our supplies, our services. That is what the operating budget funds. The capital budget funds mostly infrastructure and projects and engineering projects, while the operating budget takes care of the day-to-day operations for our staff. How is the capital budget paid for? Well, in 1956, a policy was put into place to set aside 25% of income tax to pay for general fund supported debt service. The utility projects, which you will hear about later this afternoon, are paid directly from utility fees, water, sewer, storm, and power. That 25% set aside is not used for any public utility project or debt service. The city continues to maintain its AAA bond rating with all 3 rating agencies. Nearly 78% of our general obligation debt is paid off in 10 years, and 84% of that is voted, which means the residents have given us confidence that we can place a lien on their property tax if we cannot pay our debt, which we have never had to do. And I don't want to speak for the auditor, but I don't think we have any plans to do so again. We have a self-imposed fiscal policy, which says we must have a 1.5 coverage ratio. For every dollar we want to spend, we must bring in $1.50. And also, since 1956, we've had 101 bond issues. Every so often, we go out and ask our residents to vote on a large bond package. 101 times that the city has done that, 95 of those have passed. The most recent is 2019. At a 94% approval rating. Phenomenal for a city to be able to tout that record. So I'd like to now break down how the budget is proposed. As Councilmember Brown said, it was a tough year. COVID, we had an economic crisis, but we were able to put together what I believe is the mayor's budget that addresses police reform, affordable housing in neighborhoods. The budget is a combination of really three things: the planned budget and projects, which is the CIP, new money, which will be part of an eventual bond sale, and carryover dollars. Those dollars include proceeds from previous bond sales that have not been used, or for funding that has been approved by City Council this past year using the 2019 bond proceeds. So we have to include those in our budget. The total budget, when you include all funds, everything included, will equal $1.4 billion. That is broken down by $340 million supported by the Special Income Tax Fund, or the SIT, which is supported by that 25% income tax set aside. $990 million, or 71% of the total budget, will invest in water, sewer, and power infrastructure. Again, that debt is supported by the fees that our residents pay for their utilities. And then a small portion, about $53 million, is supported by other funds, such as internal services and permanent improvement funds. If we speak just to the new money that we will eventually talk to the auditor about and to do a bond sale, that budget is $1 billion. It is supported by $205 million in the SIT. $818 million of it, or 82%, will be for public utilities. However, public utilities is asking for $661 million of that to be funded through low interest loans through the state of Ohio. So those loans will not be considered, or that amount will not be considered in any future bond sale. And then $9.6 million will be supported by other funding sources. The CIB and these projects are great for our neighborhoods, and especially job creation. You will hear later this afternoon from some of my colleagues, what will we be investing in? We'll be investing in affordable housing as part of the voted $50 million bond package. We will also be investing in drug and alcohol and mental health services as part of the police reform efforts. You will also hear about a wellness center for our police and firefighters to address the stresses of their job and their day-to-day work. You will hear about improvements to our infrastructure, such as Sullivan Avenue improvement, sidewalks, and public utility improvement, and parks. And then you'll hear about other investments that we are partnering with other community partners. The next steps will be that this evening, Council will consider legislation. The administration is requesting a passage of the budget on November 16th, and after the passage of the budget, we will then work with the city auditor to size up a future bond sale and determine the bond pricing dates. Budget, if that's okay with Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. So the Department of Finance and Management's total budget is $58.9 million. Of that request, $21 million is in new money. $3.5 million will be invested for facility renovations and repairs. $6.5 million will be invested to construct a new Hilltop Early Childhood Education Center. And I would like to thank Matt Smido from the Department of Education for his help, his support, and his efforts in this project. $1.1 million will be for the renovation of 2 floors at the Columbus Health Department for additional space, especially during COVID and the social distancing that was needed. This will enable them to have 2 additional floors to use for additional staff in the future. And then lastly, $7.5 million is earmarked to go out for an RFP for an owner's rep for the eventual design and construction of a new municipal court building in downtown Columbus. That concludes my briefing, and I want to thank Councilmember Brown, my staff, the department staffs, council members, and the mayor for all the support they have given me through this process. To view the entire budget, please visit www.columbus.gov/capital, CAPITAL. And with that, Councilmember Brown, I'm available for any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Director. I'd like to allow my colleagues to ask any questions they have of you. I have a couple to start. The first one being that as you stated in your the first part of your presentation, the administration has requested that council have a final vote on this budget on the 16th in order to accommodate a November 23rd bond sale. That is it's the fastest we've had to consider a capital budget in. I don't like to speak in broad historic terms, but in my time, can you just honestly help residents understand why the rush in terms of between proposal and bond sale, and why the delay on a proposal, so that people understand the request from the administration?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Brown. So as you had indicated earlier, typically, historically, the city has presented its capital budget in May, and that's usually passed, late spring, and then that allows us enough time to begin to size up the bond sale, which we typically will have in late fall. But with this year, with the uncertainties of revenue estimates, at one point, as you indicated early on, we didn't even think we would be able to do a capital budget. So by October, when we received our final estimate from the city auditor, we were in a position then to be able to present to the council a final capital budget based on her revised, not only her revised estimate for 2020, but her estimate for 2021. And this is why we bring this legislation so late in the year. But what has to occur is that the budget must be passed before council can consider a companion ordinance, which will come from the city auditor, which will authorize her to then begin looking at a bond sale. So the budget must pass before she can do. And with the market that the way they are, it is all going to come down to timing. And we hope that we could get something in by late or mid-December for a bond sale. Thus the reason why we would need to have the budget passed in a quicker fashion than typical, to allow the auditor to get authorization from council to then begin looking at the markets and see what the bond sale prices could be. I hope that answered the question.
Yep, it does. Thank you. And the fluctuation in income tax revenue relates to the capital budget because of the SIT, because of that set aside, and the relationship with any new funds. So
that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there other questions from my colleagues for Director Lombardi?
Chair, this is Councilmember Remy. Director, I wanted to talk or ask you to talk a little bit about the plans for the Department of Sustainability, the $650,000, what that's going towards, and will that department be funded regularly moving forward?
So the $650,000, which appears in the finance department, is part of a sustainability group that works for me. I have the energy manager who works for me. This is more specific to those projects in and around our buildings, as opposed to the sustainability department. So this is more specific to.
I get that. I'm leading you on here a little bit to try to get you to talk a little bit about what the plans are for some of our city buildings. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, certainly we always look at the envelope. The easiest thing we can do is windows. We are updating, as many of you probably know if you've been in the building, the HVAC systems in City Hall to make it more efficient. They are actually working because it has been very warm when it's cold out, which is unusual for this old house. And we're also looking at LED lighting and other ways that we can make more efficient use of our energy.
It's very important after the passage of issue 1, and certainly we want to make sure that we're doing our part. I'm obviously speaking as the chair of the Environment Committee, so thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And thank you for the follow-up.
Other questions from my colleagues? All right, thank you. I do have just a couple more on your departmental budget. The Hilltop Pre-K Center, can you, do you have information on, this is just a reminder for folks watching, this was really done as a collaborative process with, led by the Education Department and Matt Smido and as you mentioned, Director Lombardi. But it was really a community process to talk about the needs in early childhood education on the Hilltop. And Director Lombardi, do you have statistics on students to be served and where we are with design? Any other details you can share on that, which is a pretty important one for any folks from the Hilltop that are tuned in?
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. I don't know if I can give you statistics on the number of students. I can certainly get back to all the council members. Matt Smido is kind of heading up the programming and the operations of the building, but I will tell you that he did have a contract to do a study of the Hilltop area, and it was very, very clear to us that it had a big need, a lot of children in that area that needed to be served by that by this school. The design is complete. We are probably going to be breaking ground in the next month. We hope to have it open by the 22-23 school year. And while we're doing that, Matt and his team are working with a consultant to look at the operations and the programming of the facility. So I do know that I want to say it might be 200 kids, but don't quote me on that, but I can certainly get back to you. But I know there was a huge need in the Hilltop to serve those children in that area in a pre-K facility.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues?
Chair.
Yes, Council President.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership. And to Director Lombardi, we appreciate you bringing this budget proposal to us. You kind of hit on this before or earlier in your presentation, but this is a smaller capital budget being brought to us later than normal. We always have to prioritize when we're dealing with budgets. Would you walk us through again the administration's philosophy for how do we got to these as the priorities when we have a truncated availability, I guess I would say, or capacity?
Sure. Thank you, President Harden. As you can only imagine, we started this process in February with the anticipation of coming before council in May. And then this little thing called COVID showed up at our doorstep and kind of created some changes for us. But during the last 4 to 5, 6 months, we have been working various scenarios based on what we knew at the time, what we could tell by our income tax, what we thought it was going to be. So we had several scenarios that we were ready to bring forward depending on what the revenue would be. Once we knew that, once we had that answer from the city auditor, then we worked with our departments and we worked with the mayor on what priorities hit those, address those concerns that we have in the city of Columbus: affordable housing, police reform, and fixing up our neighborhoods, especially our opportunity neighborhoods. So we really started to delve into those projects that focused on those priorities. And some of our departments, and I thank them for this, had to make some tough decisions. And there are some projects that we had to push off so that we could make sure that our community was being served by this capital budget for the needs that Columbus has right now.
Thank you. And were there any, I know sometimes when we go through capital budgets, even in good years, we start off, so we have our priorities of what we want to fund that are our policy priorities, but also we have our projects that have other investment, which make it important for us to move those ahead, or else the city would lose opportunity. Are those are in this capital budget as well?
That is correct, President Harden. You will hear, especially from public service, there are some federal grant projects that they will do. There's also a lot of the affordable housing that I'm sure Director Stevens will speak to have a private leverage component to it. And we also, with the Adam H, you will hear later today about the Adam H investment. There are other private investments in that. The Boys and Girls Club, there's a private investment into that facility at Milo Grogan. So yes, the short answer is yes, there are other investments and other leverages that the city will have in its investment in this capital budget.
Great. Okay, well, seeing no other questions from members, thank you, Director. We're going to move into other departmental presentations, and I want to emphasize that in the past few years, the way we've done these hearings is out in neighborhoods where the directors so graciously give of 4 blocks of their time to come to different parts of the city and present what is relevant to that section of the city. Really based on the principle that it's hard when you're talking about an entire city budget for residents to kind of follow the money and understand what it's doing in their approximate area. And so we tried to localize these hearings and presentations in the past. So we have asked the directors to do that, given that COVID has not just the rush that we're under, but really just the kind of virtual nature of things made things so different. I've asked the directors to localize their comments as much as they can to different neighborhoods, and we appreciate them doing so. Additionally, we have not received any public speaker slips, but I did mean to say in the beginning that folks who are watching, if you're watching on Facebook, I did ask my team to monitor comments, as Council President Harden suggested, to see if there are questions coming in through Facebook that we can direct to directors. So please feel free to do that during presentations. And if you're not watching through Facebook and you find yourself with a question, please go ahead and reach out to our offices, and we will assist in answering your question promptly. After the hearing. So with that, I do believe that our first department that is up is development. So Director Mike Stevens, you can take it away.
Good afternoon, Chair Brown, members of council. The Development Department uses capital funding to help generate wealth in our communities by leveraging private investment to create jobs and increase affordable housing within our neighborhoods. Our 2020 capital improvement budget request is $46.4 million. This includes $18.2 million for affordable housing and community development initiatives and $28.2 million for community and economic development projects. Let me begin with our affordable housing initiative. In 2019, voters approved the neighborhood development bond issue authorizing up to $50 million for affordable housing and neighborhood investments. The goal is to foster a housing market where every household can obtain housing in the private market to effectively supplement the market where we cannot achieve that goal. We are investing $18.2 million in affordable housing and community development initiatives. Such investments include $11.5 million will be dedicated to the construction and renovation of affordable housing units through our partners in our low-income tax credit deals. This investment will leverage an estimated $83 million in total investment and 510 affordable housing units over the next 24 months. This also includes $1 million earmarked specifically for the Linden area to foster speculative affordable housing development, including land acquisition for future affordable housing. In addition, $2.5 million will be invested through the Community Development for All People for affordable housing on the South Side. This represents the second half of a $5 million commitment made by Mayor Ginther to the South Side community. Once complete, this investment will provide 75 new and rehab units. $2 million will be allocated to housing preservation to increase the local supply of decent, safe, and sanitary housing and decrease the number of vacant properties in our neighborhoods. $800,000 is going for improvements in the right-of-way supporting residential development. Finally, $350,000 is to help with our annual repairs to our emergency shelters. For our economic development and job creation initiatives, we are proposing an investment of $28.2 million supporting our public-private partnership program, or P3. Through the P3 program, the city makes targeted infrastructure investments that leverage private investment to support the city's economic development efforts. These projects are designed to create new employment centers, revitalize neighborhoods, and spur job creation. The partnership approach of the city has been critical to our continued growth. Over the past 5 years, we have leveraged $28.77 for every dollar the city has invested. Our current investments include $13 million for the Confluence Village New Community Authority, as well as $250,000 for infrastructure within Confluence Village, $4 million for the North Market Tower. This investment will use for infrastructure to support residential units, commercial office space, and a public plaza. $2.6 million investment for the Gravity 2.0 parking garage and utility relocation. This garage is providing 200 public parking spaces for the community, and $2 million for the infrastructure improvements supporting the White Castle mixed-use development on Goodale Avenue. Our investment is leveraging $65 million in private investment, 300 housing units, and 150,000 square feet of Class A office space. We're also contributing $1 million to leverage $3.4 million in right-of-way improvements supporting the McKinley and Souder Avenue corridor. In addition, development coordinates the city's urban infrastructure recovery and neighborhood commercial revitalization funding. Altogether, we are proposing $5.6 million for these programs. Funding is for ongoing planned neighborhood improvement projects, including new sidewalks, bikeways, curbs, ramps, traffic calming, and planted medians. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but before I turn it over, I'd like to thank the mayor and the leadership of the mayor's office, as well as Director Lombardi for prioritizing the funding around our affordable housing efforts. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. Do my colleagues have questions for Director Stevens? Councilmember Favor?
Good afternoon, everyone, and to Director Lombardi and Director Stevens, thank you for providing this information. Specifically, my questions will be akin to the housing budget. So Director Stevens or Director Lombardi, just wondering, given the fact that the city was a big investor in the MORPC regional housing study, and given the fact that voters did approve the bond, affordable housing bond proposal last year, just wondering how the budget as it is, the proposed budget as it is right now, how was the priorities informed by what was released through the MORPC report? And if you could lay out how what those priorities are actually.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilmember Favor, Chair Brown, members of council. Director Lombardi, if you don't mind, I'll answer this question. Thank you. So we looked at, as we were putting together our request around getting affordable housing dollars in this capital budget, we looked closely at the MORPC regional plan, knowing that, it's a plan that the whole region needs to work on to address our need for affordable housing. But how did it help shape how we're going to spend our dollars? 2 of the 5 core issues that were identified in that plan really drove how we requested the dollars. And one of those was demand for more homes that serve a wider range of ages, abilities, and household sizes, which is growing as a result of the region's changing demographics. So as we look to use those dollars, and I talked about the, get the number right, the $11.5 million we got to invest in new projects, and specifically those low income tax credit deals. That was really important, a guidance from this report. Also is the other core issue that we focus on in the Morpsey report to provide funding towards is the housing instability among our residents. And it's really in the region's rate of cost burden, evictions, and homelessness. So one is the money that's going to those LIHTC deals is one way of addressing it. The other is that $2 million that we are putting, get my information correct here, that we are putting to housing preservation. So we're making sure that we can help address those homes that need repair. We also know there's specific barriers that exacerbate the, I shouldn't use 25-cent words when I only have a nickel vocabulary. I apologize. We know there's barriers that cause trouble for our residents in getting into affordable housing, and that's the increasing costs of residential development, including land costs, site selection, and regulatory costs. So while we use the 11.5 million, that's that first tranche of that $50 million of voted bond authority, that is going into those LIHTC deals to help make those projects feasible from an economic perspective. I've got a whole list of a map of kind of how the Morpsey report and how we're putting those dollars align, but I'm going to stop, take a breath, and see if you have any follow-up questions.
Well, not a follow-up, but maybe it's a follow-up. So thank you for that answer, number one. But as you know, voters did approve, it was a $50 million housing bond. And it looks like we're activating 11.5. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So when can voters expect the other, what is that, 30-ish million, 40-ish million to also be activated?
I can tell you as we start thinking about the 2021 capital budget, we're going to try to put as much, we're going to put a plan together that tries to activate as much of that 38.5 million that's feasible, considering the current economic environment we're in.
And to the voter, or I'm sorry, to the resident that would ask, well, why not, activate the entire amount that was approved? What would be the response to that question?
I think as there's a couple things. One is we build up the capacity to get these dollars out to support these deals and encourage more of these low-income income tax credit deals that we can help sell. That's important. To balance the different priorities we have, and as we are in a challenged economic time, I think leading with the affordable housing portion of this budget is really critical.
Thank you, Director. And then my very last question, Chair Brown, it really is just around timing and when residents can expect to see the manifestation of the investment in the housing arena. So if 11.5 is going to help support the development of projects that are in the process, when can residents expect to see those online?
You're going to see in the next 6 months groundbreaking on these projects, and they'll be available within the next 24 months.
Thank you, Director Stevens.
And are there other questions from my colleagues? Thank you, Councilmember Favor. Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions for Director Stevens, we appreciate your presentation. And next, we will move on to the Department of Public Safety. We have with us Deputy Director Dan Giangardella.
Better unmute there. President Pro Tem Brown, members of council, on behalf of Safety Director Ned Pettis, I want to thank you for allowing me to present to you some information regarding the Public Safety 2020 capital budget. Public Safety's proposed 2020 capital improvements budget is focused on the mayor's priorities of protecting Columbus neighborhoods by renovating police and fire facilities, improving the wellness of first responders, purchasing new fire engine, medics, and ladders, and upgrading technology. Unlike the general fund operating budget, public safety is actually a very small percentage of the capital budget. The 2020 public safety budget proposes approximately $13.8 million in new funding. This funding can be broken down into generally 3 areas: police and fire renovations, fire apparatus replacements, and some technology improvements. The 2020 budget for public safety includes $3 million in new funds for general renovations and improvements to police and fire facilities. Fire division has 34 fire stations, and police has over a dozen precinct facilities, as well as academy buildings for both of those divisions. And there's always a need for pavement restorations for those facilities, generator and HVAC upgrades, roof and window replacements, security and life safety upgrades, and generally other improvements to those facilities. Some that are approaching 70 years old. In addition, there is $300,000 requested to complete the design for the police driving track. The 2018 capital budget authorized about $1 million for the design of that driving track. That design is currently underway, and when constructed, that track will be used to train recruits and officers in various driving techniques and so forth. Also, and I think Director Lombardi mentioned this, the budget allocates $3 million for renovation of a current space to create a police and fire joint wellness center. This facility will be located at the old Shepherd Library branch on Nelson Road. This will be a place where first responders can go and receive counseling, therapy, and intervention to assist in identifying and preserving their mental health and wellness due to the daily stresses experienced on the job. That center, once completed, will be staffed with employee assistance help, chaplains, and other trained health professionals who can provide crisis intervention and therapy to address mental health issues. I think also this was a proposal as part of the Mayor's Columbus Safety Advisory Committee as well. With respect to fire apparatus, the capital budget suggests contemplates $6 million in new funding for the purchase of fire apparatus. This is consistent with funding that has been allocated in the past. Obviously, it is substantial, but it helps us to have a more reliable and new fire apparatus to respond to emergencies for the fire division. It helps us optimize response times and keep maintenance low. This funding will allow the division to procure 5 heavy rescue vehicles and 1 tiller ladder, as well as a variety of equipment that goes on those apparatus, such as extraction tools, electronic communications, and radio equipment. With respect to technology, the capital budget requests $1.5 million to increase and upgrade the existing storage capacity for body-worn cameras used by police officers. The implementation of body-worn cameras roughly 5 years ago was a priority of the mayor. And due to the number of cameras that officers are now wearing, also due to the number of videos and length of time that video must be held, we need these funds to procure additional computer storage space so that we can continue to preserve video from that system. In addition to that, there are several $1 million in carryover funds that are still being used in public safety, some of those for the eventual design and development of a real-time crime center for police. And there also is some remaining funds, carryover funds for police and fire renovations, some elevator replacements, and as I said before, some general renovations that for fire and police facilities, as well as potentially some real estate funds for the procurement of land for future substations and fire stations. Thank you for your time. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Deputy Director. I would like to open the floor for questions from my colleagues. I have one brief one first. You mentioned the body-worn camera storage, and that's a capital cost. Can you remind us of the amount, and then can you comment on how often that kind of expenditure will need to be made as we continue the use of those in the field? Do we anticipate needing an investment every 3 or so years for increased storage? Should this keep us set for a little longer, et cetera?
Councilmember Brown, members of council, this, I believe, is the first, by the way, it's at $1.5 million for storage. This, I believe, is the first investment in storage since we've procured the original system approximately 5 years ago. It will generally be an ongoing expense. Hopefully this will take us to at least another 5 years. Obviously, a lot of that depends on how much video storage that we have available to us. I think, while public safety did a great job in procuring this system and laying out and implementing it, I think some of the unknown was how much video we would actually have and how much we would have to store. Obviously, the initial investment proved to be very well done. It's not unusual over a 5-6 year period to be able to assess how much storage space we have and how much we'll need in the future. So I think this will be an ongoing investment. This will take us, we would think, for at least another 4 or 5 years during implementation. But obviously, this is something we'll continue to closely monitor. And over time, as whether it's public records or evidentiary changes take place, we'll be able to assess how long we have to keep some of this video. But right now, obviously, public safety is, we're going on the cautious side and trying to keep as much of this information that we can at this point. So we're confident in this particular investment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Director. Other questions for my colleagues? Yeah, Councilmember Favor.
Sorry, my computer is acting up today, so I don't know if you could see me or not. So just wondering if, and I had to shut down for just a moment, so I may have missed this, the comment that you may have made in line with this question. But just as, council has been very intentional about having this conversation around reimagining public safety. And obviously there are clear differences for the Department of Safety as it relates to the operating budget and the capital budget. So if you could maybe speak to the expectations that residents should have as it relates to what that editing process would look like, or how it looks with the capital budget right now. So I'm sorry, I'm asking that question not the right way. There's a $3.5 million that's going to be designated towards renovating the Shepherd Library. I believe that was one of the recommendations from the Safety Advisory Commission, correct? Yes.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so obviously there's going to be clear differences between what residents can expect from a conversation around reimagining public safety and what can be delivered in a capital budget versus the operating budget. So just wondering if you could speak to that and maybe elaborate on the administration's perspective on prioritizing some of those issues. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. I'll do my best to answer that. So, yes, at the Councilmember Favor, members of council, at the beginning, I did allude a little bit that public safety is a rather a much more proportionally smaller part of the capital budget. As I said, I think we're around $13.8 million of this budget. So of the 4 or 5 departments today involved, I think Director Barty can speak to us, but we are the smallest portion of that. With opposite, when it comes to the operating budget, obviously public safety has a significant amount of funding in that budget. So with respect to reimagining public safety, there is as I said earlier, the Joint Wellness Center. This is, as you correctly mentioned, this is part of the Safety Advisory Committee recommendation for the health and wellness of police officers and firefighters. And this is the way I think that a lot of communities are going, whether it's first responders, police, even in the medical field. I think one of the things that we have found over the decades is that due to the stresses of the job, and that could be the intense situations, let's say, that our police officers and firefighters encounter, especially in our large urban areas in a city like Columbus, whether that's the trauma. I mean, these are individuals that they're always on the front line. They're the first ones to, whether it's to run into a burning building or to come upon very traumatic scenes and deal with life-threatening situations. So I think there's been a focus more on the mental health of these individuals. And I think with respect to reimagining, I think it's important that we focus on their mental health and the stresses, and hopefully that will continue to pay us dividends down the road with respect to those interactions with the community out there, that goes along with improving that. So I hope that answers your question.
It does answer my question, and just wondering, well, two things. There's nothing that exists right now that's available for our first responders to service their mental health their mental health needs. Is that correct?
Well, I would say it's obviously our health department has an employee assistance program, and that is open to all employees, whether they are civilian or police and firefighters. And I believe that a significant number of our first responders over the years have taken advantage of that. There are chaplains that are, I believe we have both police and fire chaplains that are either volunteer or part-time staff. We have had, and at least in my first run here at public safety, I know that we had I think psychiatrists and psychologists on retainer, on contract. I'm not aware today if we have that. I suspect we probably do, but that has also been available to our first responders as well for counseling there. So, and of course, through the insurance programs that cities have, employees certainly would have the ability to go to their own doctor or medical practitioner of their choosing. So there is some ability now, but as I said, I think we have found over the years that perhaps that's not quite enough to deal with the stresses of what some of our first responders are in. This is in some ways groundbreaking studies that have shown that they need more attention from us than perhaps they've gotten in the past. And as you rightly pointed out, I think the Safety Advisory Commission has also looked into this, and they're seeing the way things are progressing with responding to mental health across the board, and whether that's for first responders or citizens out there and people that are struggling. I think there's been a more intensive focus, as it should be, on people's health and mental welfare.
And then my last question is just really around the renovation, the funds that are going to be used to renovate, one of our older libraries. 3.5 it's a nice price tag. So just for residents that might be wondering why we would not put a similar type facility or create space at the police academy in order to achieve the same stated goal.
Yes, a very good question. A couple reasons, really. One, we're able to renovate a facility that we are able to acquire from the library, I think for either no cost to us. It's an old library branch. I think if I recall, this is the Shepherd Library branch. There was a new one built just yards away. This building is sitting idle. It's a good use of an existing structure for us. Obviously, the library system outgrew that space. So in that sense, it's very economical and efficient for us to take advantage of this opportunity. And I think also to be in a place where, you mentioned specifically, why not use, for instance, maybe where the academy is or an existing police or fire structure. I think it's important for privacy purposes that perhaps this facility is in another area where it lends itself to people being more comfortable going there, and it's not necessarily next to, a current substation or academy. So for those reasons, we think this is very efficient and economical use of funds, and it's an important use of funds. And I think also that to use existing structures that are right now not being used, I think also speaks to efficiency. Thank you.
Councilmember Favor, this is Director Lombardi. If I could just add a couple more points to Deputy Director Gene Gardell's. Everything he said is correct and he's on point. And the point that he made there about the renovation is there's so much it has to go in for the privacy, some soundproofing material, those things, as any clinic that you would go to as a regular resident. They want to protect your privacy in those locations. Also, I don't know if Director William Scott will talk about this in her speech, but the investment we're making in Adam H. Also is part of the reforming of policing, providing mental health and drug addiction care to some of our residents, and somewhere for them to go to seek that help through social workers or health professionals. And you asked a question about the operating budget. Even though we're not completely through with that today, I think you'll see where the strategy of combining both health professionals, social workers, along with, law enforcement will be part of that budget process and part of that budget submission.
Great, thank you. I have one more question on this as well. Mine has to do with sort of uptake of the services by our first responders. I guess culture as part of that. So if you forgive the crude analogy, when I had my first child, my husband technically had an allowance for time for paid family leave at his place for paternity leave, but no one ever used it. So there was a stigma attached to him using what was offered, right? We actually see that in paid family leave across the country, even government-run programs. So a cultural change is imperative if people are going to use what's available to them. And so this is exciting. It is a new statement about the commitment of the city to the mental wellness of our first responders. But how do we then, are there operational considerations? We're talking about a capital budget, but investing these kind of dollars, we want to make sure there are operational considerations to ensure there's a culture there that encourages our employees to use this service that's there for them. Can you speak to whether that's an active consideration, has been planned for? If you've looked to outside partners, we aren't a mental health provider, have you looked to outside partners to help design some systems that will push for that really important culture to kind of undergird the physical investment in walls and concrete and all that?
I guess I'll go first, Director Lombardi. So I think obviously anytime we renovate a facility like this, in this case, a health and wellness, or if it be at a fire station, substation, the design firms that are hired usually will reach out to the experts, and obviously we'll work as public safety. We'll work with construction management and finance to incorporate the right people and design it the correct way. Again, this is a joint wellness center. There are going to be certain considerations, as the director mentioned, to privacy and so forth, but also to, what's the best environment to bring these people? What do we need there? Do we need a fitness room, a physical fitness room? Is there certain mental health fitness that has to be associated with this, and I'm sure that we will work very closely with them. And it's a great point on your part. This is, as you I think alluded to, this is a very evolving research and science out there, and much more emphasis on it. And certainly, I think we will incorporate those things into this. I think the other part of this, and I know Director Lombardi may have some more input, but our police and firemen, and I think specifically police, I think have taken great advantage over the years of our current employee assistance program with the health department and the counselors, the excellent counselors, frankly, that they have. I don't think there'll be any issue with sort of promoting this facility once it's up and running, but I think your comment bears keeping in mind that we should be doing that, letting our officers and firefighters know that this facility exists for them and for their wellness. Director, I don't know if you had any additional comments you might want to add to that.
No, and I think Deputy Director Giangardella is correct. I think the promotion of the facility and the programs that it will provide will be very important. And I think as it relates to how will we ensure that the employees will take advantage of it, that's going to come down to a policy decision at the both with HR and I would assume the safety director's office. But I think Dan's point that just like the employee assistance program, there's constantly information sent out to all the employees that is available to everybody.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. If there are no other questions for Mr. Giangardella, see no others. So I will move on to the Department of Public Utilities. Thank you for joining us, Assistant Director or Fiscal Assistant Director John Lee. Are you here?
I'm here.
Here we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. President Pro Tem Brown and members of City Council, thank you for the opportunity to present an overview of the Department of Public Utilities 2020 capital improvement budget. Our total budget includes $991 million in total funding, with $173 million in new funding and $818 million in carryover. Of this amount, 61% goes to sewer line work and sewer treatment plant upgrades. We also have about 34% that goes towards water treatment plant upgrades and water line improvements. And 2.7% of that total is for stormwater improvements in neighborhoods, and about 1.8% for streetlight projects throughout the city and circuitry upgrades. A little bit of background on the Department of Public Utilities. We serve about 1.2 million customers in the Columbus area. We provide water, sewer, storm, and power services. We have 3 water plants, 2 wastewater plants, and we have about 15,000 customers, electric customers, and we service over 52,000 streetlights. Each year, we produce about 50 billion gallons of finished water to our customers and treat about 70 billion gallons of wastewater. As was discussed by Director Lombardi, a little bit about our funding. It comes from capital dollars, from bond dollars, and from the Ohio EPA. A lot of our construction runs through the Ohio EPA loan program, which has very favorable interest rates and repayment terms. And all of our revenue comes from utility bill payments from residents and businesses. As far as how we decide to do various projects, a lot of it's driven by master planning within each division. There's a lot of growing development in the region, so we're building new infrastructure to serve that growing development, obviously upgrading old and aging infrastructure, resident concerns, and we do a lot of computer modeling to help assist us in our project planning. I'll go over each division and some of the major projects. On the sewer side, over $315 million, or roughly half of the 2020 spending, is going to be in compliance with our EPA consent order. And as I mentioned, the loan program, about 75% of those dollars are going to be funded through the Ohio EPA loan program. A very sizable project in 2020 is going to be our lower Olentangy Tunnel. That's about a $230 million tunnel project. And if you remember in years past, we built the Ores Tunnel, which was a little bit more expensive, but around the same amount. It's basically this lower Olentangy Tunnel is a large tunnel. It's going to help reduce combined sewer overflows and relieve a lot of the trunk sewers in the area in the collection system. We're also doing a large trunk extension project up in the Northeast corridor. There's a lot of growing development up there. And we're going to continue on with our Blueprint Columbus program. Each year we allocate about $80 million to that, and we're going to continue work in Clintonville and the Linden area. We'll be doing some lateral lining in there, green infrastructure installations, and a lot of roof redirection projects. We're going to continue engineering a lot of our Blueprint projects. We'll be in the 5th by Northwest area and a lot of the Linden areas. And we have several projects for some pump installations in the Hilltop area planned. As with water, like sewer, what we do is we do a lot of facility upgrades at our treatment plants. We have about $16 million at Jackson Pike planned in 2020 and $36 million at our Southerly plant. And the remaining amount, about $113 million, is just for a lot of general collection system upgrades all throughout the city in multiple community planning areas, large trunk sewers, down to smaller diameter sewers that serve neighborhoods. And we also have a large home septic system elimination program. On the water side, the total CIB is $340 million, includes $277 million in new funding and $64 million in carryover. Again, about 60% of these projects are funded by the Ohio EPA loan program. One of the largest projects in 2020 that we're going to be taking on is our automatic meter reading program. Over the next 4 years, we're going to be installing new meters in homes and businesses. And so with these new meters, we'll be able to read those remotely. And it will also allow customers better access to their consumption and billing information. Once we have all these water meters installed, we'll probably move more towards monthly billing for residential customers versus currently they're billed quarterly. Another component of our water CIB is obviously water line replacements, and that's very much a neighborhood-focused type of project. We cover multiple streets with those projects, and we have several planned in the community planning areas of the far south area, the mid-east area, the Hilltop, and North Linden. We also have several in the growing Franklinton area, some in the old Beachwald area, and some along Dublin Road and Olentangy River Road. As far as plant upgrades, several of those going on at Dublin Road Water Plant, Hapcremene, and Parsons Avenue. We're doing some upgrades to our intake structures. We have a lot of concrete basins that need repair, and also we're looking at hypochlorite as a treatment process there, and several HVAC and pump replacements. On the storm side, the total CIB is $27 million. That includes $16 million in new funding and $11 million in carryover. Like water and sewer, we also take advantage of the Ohio EPA loan program there, and we have about 9.4 funded through that program. Again, very much in the neighborhoods with our stormwater projects. These largely address stormwater flooding and undersized and aging infrastructure in those neighborhoods. So we're going to be in the Mid-East community planning area, Far East and Westland areas, more work in the old Beachwald area, the Arena District along Morse Road, and as well as in Linden. We're also doing a lot of some repairs to our flood wall, looking at automatic closure operations so we can close those rather than making that a manual effort. It can be more automated, so we're in the design phase of that. And part of our storm water program, we're also looking at several large diameter sewers and looking at the assessment, going in and scanning, a lot of sonar work, looking at the integrity of those large storm sewers. And we have a program of about $1.5 million planned each year for that. And finally, for our division of power, the total CIB is $18.7 million. 11.2 of that is carryover and 7.6 in new funding. And this is primarily for distribution system upgrades, circuitry upgrades to help improve reliability for residents and businesses, and also installing new streetlights and replacing existing ones. A lot of the high pressure sodium streetlights we have out in the system now, we're moving over towards LED. As far as the total funding, about $9.3 million of those dollars are going to go for streetlights. We have a program that we're starting up here in 2020, our smart street lighting program. We're going to start in the Linden area where we're going to be adding new LED lights there, and it's more of a long-term program. In the future years throughout our capital plan, we're going to allocate about $3.5 million towards the smart street lighting program, with the goal of basically replacing all of our 52,000 street lights with LED lights. As far as in 2020, some of the individual street lighting projects we plan to do, we have one along Refugee Road, South High Street, Cleveland Avenue, East Main, East 5th, Hall Road, and Sawmill Road. And finally, we've got about $9.4 million in circuitry and distribution system upgrades. A couple of those areas are primarily going to be along North High Street and Hudson Street. So with those distribution system upgrades, we'll install new poles, put in transformers, other equipment, with the goal of eliminating power outages. So with that, that's a summary of the Department of Public Utilities 2020 capital improvement budget. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from my colleagues? All right. Oh, Councilmember Dorrance.
Thanks, Chair Brown. Real quick, Assistant Director Lee, a lot of the infrastructure that's being deployed by the Department of Public Utilities, in certainly my view and others, is sort of green infrastructure, right? When we talk about the Blueprint program, which you mentioned that briefly. I wanted to know if you could just give us sort of the quick 90-second overview of Blueprint and what that means for our city, but also just from a strategic standpoint of the department looking at upgrades and street lightings and all these other kinds of things to make sure that we're doing things as sort of as efficiently and as environmentally friendly as possible, especially with the outsized footprint that public utilities has on the capital improvement budget.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Dorrance. As far as a quick overview of our Blueprint program, we basically have 4 pillars associated with that, and what we have is a green infrastructure component, lateral lining, and a roof redirection and sump pump installation. And what we do is we go into neighborhoods. We've been in Clintonville at the start of the program where we're going in and lining laterals. That's basically improving the integrity of the existing storm sewer through a lining material rather than actually ripping up and installing new. But we're also installing rain gardens. That helps improve the efficiency of the stormwater system by eliminating a lot of the infiltration and inflow into the sanitary sewer system. So by moving that rainwater into these rain gardens, which percolate, and we've got permeable pavers that we're installing in streets. A lot of these upgrades have that goal in mind, really to get a lot of that stormwater out of the sanitary system. In the past, a lot of that's been going down into our treatment plants, and part of that is, the logic behind that is why we have those big tunnels. We capture a lot of that runoff in those tunnels, and then we can slowly treat that water over time. Then we have a roof redirect program, which we're seeing that starting to a lot of construction projects there, where we're actually taking the downspouts on homes and looking around the footer of the home to get that water again away and out from the four corners, say, of a house and into the actual storm sewer where it should be directed properly. And finally, our sump pump program, that part of that pillar basically, again, gets it around the perimeter of the foundation drain, and we install new sump pump in the home if it's needed, again, to channel that out to the actual storm sewer. So a lot of these, that program is, we've been at it for a few years. We continue into the Linden area, and we've got our whole 6-year capital plan. We start moving into new neighborhoods. We're in design in some neighborhoods right now. We'll eventually get into construction. So as far as, like, again, your comment on efficiency upgrades on the street lighting component, as I mentioned, a lot of the conversion over to LED lights, that's probably the biggest component there.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Dorrance, is that sufficient? Great. All right. Other questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Lee. We will move into public service now, and we have here with us Assistant Director Steve Wenzel of Public Service. I think I'm getting that order correct. Yes. Mr. Wenzel, the floor is yours. We can't hear you for some reason. Still can't hear you. I don't know. Angie, can you tell what might be going on?
Angie stepped away, but this is Mark. He is unmuted on our side, so it looks like it's something on his PC that's not working right now for him.
No, still nothing. Well, I'm going to suggest you try to dial. If you can't fix it, try to dial back in. Steve, do you want to try to, I'm going to move along to neighborhoods. Do you want to try to hang up and dial back in? And then we'll see if we can get it working then. Okay, thank you. Director William Scott, the Department of Neighborhoods. How do you sound?
I think I'm okay.
Audible, great. You can go ahead and proceed into your presentation, and we'll just reverse order there. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair Brown and President Harden and members of council. The Department of Neighborhoods for the capital budget has a funding request of $500,000. This is for our Linden Area Healthy Homes Program and is a partnership between the Columbus Nationwide Children's Hospital, Healthy Homes, Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families Collaborative, and the Community Development for All People. This is also a part of our One Linden Community Plan work. This program will replicate what similar work that was done on the South Side in collaboration with Nationwide Children's Hospital and Healthy Homes, Healthy Families. And the goal is to support our neighborhoods by assisting homeowners and residents with exterior repairs while facilitating neighborhood pride, community reinvestment, and responsible home ownership and responsible tenants. You've heard from my other colleagues in both development and public service and public utilities, of some of the investments in our neighborhood. And this is one addition to that. If you look at what some of the other departments are doing, they're also following along with the work of both the One Linden Plan and the Hilltop Community Plan. And that is all I have. Thank you. If there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Director William Scott. Are there questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Favor?
Yes, good afternoon, Director Carla William Scott. Good to see you. So just for our residents who are unfamiliar with the partnership between Nationwide and community development on the South Side, could you go into a little bit of greater detail about what we can expect in Linden with the similar partnership?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Healthy Neighborhoods, Healthy Families team will be doing outreach in the community, which they've started. They'll do some outreach for residents, letting them know that the program is available, what kind of exterior home repairs are permissible under the program. And then they'll talk to them about the application process, similar to what they did on the South Side. And then through that, that's how they'll get residents that will apply to for the exterior home repair program.
And then I think Hannah Jones might be on, hopefully somebody's on from the Department of Development, but this is separate from the city's current housing repair program.
Correct, yes. The ones that we manage are homeowner services that are done citywide. Strategically, as part of the One Linden plan, there was the desire to focus on the Linden neighborhood specifically, and given that the Department of Neighborhoods really has a leadership position in implementation of that, it made sense to have them lead that effort, being part of our regular programmatic work.
Thank you both.
Great. I am here, but searching for my charger, so I didn't want to give you all the tour of my house. Are there any other questions for 2020, right? For Director William Scott, we really appreciate the overview of an exciting program. Other questions?
Sorry about that. I stumbled at the beginning, Mike. I'm the virtual school Nana today, and she's ready for lunch. And so we had a little bit, we were having conversation about a sandwich when I was trying to do a presentation.
Well, that's how it goes. We are understanding over here. All right. Well, I am going to see. Thank you so much, Director, for your time and presentation. I'm going to see if Mr. Wenzel, if your audio is working.
How about now? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Hey, great. Terrific.
So a refresher, Mr. Wenzel's with Public Service, and the floor.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Brown, President Hardin, members of council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak briefly about the Department of Public Services proposed 2020 capital improvement budget. The Public Services proposed capital improvements budget totals $157 million this year, which is made up of $97.9 million in new funding, $59.1 million in carryover funding that will invest in roadways, sidewalks, bikeways, bridges, and other projects that will improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. As in past years, the centerpiece of Public Services' proposed capital improvement budget is $28.9 million for the city's resurfacing program. Of that $28.9 million, $23.8 will go towards resurfacing roadways across our city and all of our neighborhoods. That work consists of milling the existing pavement, overlaying with new asphalt, minor curb replacement, as well as replacing curb and sidewalks associated with installing ADA, wheelchair ramps, and some full depth pavement repair. This year, we've broken up our resurfacing program into what we call projects, and this year we have 2 projects. Our first project for resurfacing, we're estimating about $16.6 million. This contract will include repairing and resurfacing 102 streets. We're going to construct 486 ADA curb ramps along those streets. And just a couple of samples of some streets that we'll be resurfacing as part of that package. We're going to resurface Cheswick Road from Glenshaw Avenue to Wallingford Avenue. We're going to resurface Hess Street from 5th Avenue to King Avenue, Starcrest Drive from Ringfield Drive to Glennon Drive, Wright Road from Gender Road to Bowen Road. And our resurfacing project 2, we're estimating that to be $9.9 million this year. We're going to construct, repair, or resurface 93 city streets and construct 330 ADA curb ramps as a part of that package. Some sample streets that we'll be doing here is Linden Avenue from Hudson Avenue to Myrtle Avenue. We're looking at Ingleside Avenue from Buttles to First Avenue. Stevens Drive West from Michael Court to Eakin Road, and Clarkston Avenue from Wayburn to Courtright Road. Also included in this $28.9 million resurfacing program is $2.2 million for urban paving projects. What these projects are joint projects that we have between us and the Ohio Department of Transportation. And it's to resurface roadways that go across both of our jurisdictions. So we share in that cost for the portion that is in Columbus. And next year, we're going to budget $2.2 million to throw in for these joint projects. In some cases, we bid it and we hold the construction contracts, and in other cases, ODOT will do that. But this is our overall share of that part of our program. We're going to invest another $1 million through resurface roads. These are for joint projects that we have with our colleagues over in utilities. A lot of times when they're out putting a water line in or doing some sewer repair, we'll come by and we'll resurface that road when they're done with the repairs. So we're going to allocate an additional $1 million this year just to resurface some of those roads where they have projects that are going on that meet certain criteria, of course. Finally, we're going to use $1.7 million in carryover funding. This is to finish our pavement and asset management project, to perform pavement condition survey, assessment, and inventory of the entire city roadway network. And this consists of about 2,100 center lane miles. So we do an inventory of this every 5-10 years, and we kind of look at all of our streets. We look at, we classify it as arterial or residential, and we also will look at the condition of the pavement of that street. Also included within our proposed capital improvement budget are other high-level investments that are going to be made in our neighborhoods, such as design and right-of-way acquisition dollars. This is for the arterial street rehab, State Route 161 from 71 to Cleveland Avenue project. This is in our Northland community. It's budgeted at a little over $1.9 million. This project also is going to leverage another $1 million in funding from MORPC. It's going to include some additional pedestrian and bike facilities. We're going to install new traffic signals. We're going to widen the pavement and resurface it. We're going to add raised medians on the side streets. And we're going to install a few mini roundabouts up in that area also. As Director Lombardi had mentioned earlier in his presentation, we're going to invest $10 million in a comprehensive streetscape improvement plan along Sullivan Avenue. This is from Hague to the I-70 interchange in the greater Hilltop community. What that is going to include is the replacement of traffic signals, replacing existing sidewalks where necessary. We're going to make them ADA compliant. We're going to seal pavement cracks. We're going to replace old striping on the roads. We're going to replace deteriorating curbs and damaged street signs. The replacement addition of street lights, and the addition of this will help slow traffic at intersections within that corridor. We're also going to invest $3.7 million. This will provide for the completion of design, right-of-way, and utility costs. This is associated with a Hudson Avenue project. So this project is going to completely redesign and reconstruct Hudson Avenue from I-70 to Cleveland Avenue. This is in our Linden community. We're going to make it into a unified thoroughfare that will include installing new curbs, reconstructing and modification to the existing median on the east leg of the I-70 and Hudson intersection. We're going to put sidewalks on the north side of the street and a shared use path on the south side of the street. We're going to add some street trees, new traffic signals, some storm sewer, and a new 24-inch water main, as well as some new ADA curb ramps at that intersection. Included in this year's capital budget is new funding amount of approximately $3.4 million. This is for our bridge rehabilitation program. This includes the construction of the Lehman Road Bridge in an amount of about $1.3 million. This project includes replacement of the existing Lehman Road Bridge over Georges Creek. This is in the southeast Columbus community. The new structure will accommodate a 3-lane section of a bridge. Plus, it's going to have 4-foot shoulders and sidewalks on both sides. Lehman Road will be resurfaced and widened to accommodate the new bridge structure. This budget will also include the construction related to the city's citywide bridge program. This is about $572,000 this year. The Division of Infrastructure Management maintains about 206 bridges across the city. So the work for this program will include replacement of expansion joints, full and partial depth concrete deck replacements. We'll do some deck patching on the bridge, some concrete overlays where necessary. We'll repair and refurbish some curb and sidewalks on the bridge if it should have it, as well as patching some bridge wing walls. This year's capital budget also includes another $2 million bikeway development program. This budget is going to fund about $722,000. This will be used to design a shared use path on Tussing Road. That'll be from Bryce Road to Hines Road. This is on the Far East Community Planning area. We'll also invest another $361,000 for design of a shared use path on Georgesville Road. That will run from Parkwick Drive to Sullivan Avenue. And this is in the greater Hilltop community. This year, the city will make significant investments in our PED safety program. We're going to invest about $8.4 million this year in our PED safety program throughout the city. $4 million of that will be used to design new sidewalks in Worthington Woods Boulevard. This is in our far north neighborhood. And on Courtright Road, this is in our mid-east neighborhood. And we're also designing sidewalks on Walford Street, which is in the Northland community. We will use $2.5 million to continue with the design, acquisition, and construction of the Operation Safe Walks program, which will install new sidewalks by schools around the city. This program is designed to invest in sidewalks and aging infrastructure along streets and near neighborhood schools to promote safety of our students. One Operation Safe Walks program that you'll see go into construction this year is a project out in our southeast community. This is putting sidewalks on Refugee Road. We're going to invest about $1.7 million to construct those on the north side of Refugee from New Bixby to Blue Moon. And we're also going to construct them on the south side of Refugee from New Bixby to the sidewalk that currently exists just west of Glenbyre Street. Again, these are sidewalks that we're doing around the Independence community, as well as I think Liberty Elementary School is over in that part of the area too. We're also going to use $1.9 million to invest in sidewalks around our Celebrate One areas. Celebrate One sidewalk projects in the city's 8 opportunity neighborhoods help to improve pedestrian access to women's, infants, and children's program locations. Sidewalk connections may also be constructed to create connections from CODA bus stops to WIC program locations and other health and educational resources. This improved pedestrian access to WIC and other helpful community services assists Celebrate One in their mission to decrease infant mortality within our community. These projects play an important role in improving the health and quality of life in our opportunity neighborhoods, so they are safer for moms-to-be, babies, and families. Lastly, included within our 2020 capital improvement program, we're going to allocate just a little over $6 million to our refuse collection division. The majority of these costs, about $4.9 million, will go to replacement of some of our heavy-duty equipment that we have out at refuse collection. This could be anywhere from our rear loader trucks to our automated side loaders, to our knuckle boom trucks, which are instrumental in us fighting illegal dumping, There's 25 different pieces of equipment that we're going to use to buy with this $4.9 million. We're also going to allocate about $1 million, and this is for replacement of our refuse containers. Every year, just like some of our equipment, these containers have a useful life. They break and deteriorate after years of service, and we allocate roughly about $1 million a year to replace, let alone our 90-gallon containers, but also our 300-gallon, as well as some of our recycling containers. We're also going to allocate about $100,000 to do some minor facility improvements at our different refuse transfer stations too. With that being said, I'd like to thank council and the community for this opportunity to present the 2020 capital improvement budget for the Department of Public Service. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. We know that residents pay particular attention to the budget of public service because, forgive the pun, but those are the ones that feel the most concrete, I think, to many of them. So thank you for the thorough presentation that residents can follow along to. And again, just a reminder to contact our offices with any specific questions. For those who are listening about the projects that Mr. Wenzel ran through. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Okay. Well, I would like to ask one of you, Mr. Wenzel, just about resurfacing of our roads. There is a slightly smaller resurfacing budget. There's less funding in this budget for resurfacing than past years, and just wanted to, obviously we're working with overall a sort of contracted budget, but given our roads are typically in our region. Sometimes, they move logistics, of course, but they're also really a lot of commuter roads. And, is it reasonable to assume that as residents have been on the average working more from home and traveling less, we are seeing fewer road repair needs this year over past years? Am I drawing too neat a conclusion, or do you think that that is a real factor out there? Oh,
In the wrong way. There we go. Oh, thank you, Chair Brown. Really, the wear and tear on our roadways does come, from traffic, and it comes from winter weather, and it comes from salt and things of that nature. One of the things that we've noticed during COVID is that, yes, we have seen a significant decline as far as traveling cars across our roads, but really our truck traffic hasn't really gone down that much. We're still moving trucks around a lot of our city streets to deliver supplies and deliver things of that. They seem to have the biggest wear and tear on our streets. Of course, you don't see them as much in the residential areas. You're going to see them more on our arterial roadways and things like that. But truck traffic is it's down, of course, somewhat. Not as big as some of our car traffic. Car traffic has been down anywhere between 14 to 18%. It was really low at the beginning parts of COVID when we had our shutdown, where truck traffic is averaging down around 5%. At some point, it has been flat and even up a percent or two. So we're still seeing that kind of traffic, but not as much probably in our residential roadways because more people are working from home. It is a slightly less budget than we've gotten in recent few years. We typically get, anywhere from $27 to $35 million in resurfacing funds. What makes it an anomaly this year, a little bit different, is the late start, of course. Typically, when we pass the budget in April and May, in past years, we were able to get a bigger jump start on our resurfacing program. The later start this year has kind of hindered that a little bit. Typically we usually do 1 or 2 three or four packages even a year. This year we're doing two, just because we couldn't necessarily probably get it contracted and spent by the end of this year. So some of those projects that we may have slated for our resurfacing package 3 this year will flow into next year, and I think it will be our resurfacing package 0, because we'll be starting hopefully quickly next year and getting some of the projects out. So that's some of the decreases you're seeing. Also is just kind of some of the late start.
Thank you, Chair Brown. So my question is more just around processing and prioritization. So, for residents who may feel that we kind of picked streets that need to be resurfaced, sidewalks that need to be repaired out of the blue, there is a formula that is used in order to prioritize what streets are going to be resurfaced and sidewalks and ADA curb ramps that will be repaired. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
Absolutely, Council Member Favor. So a lot of times you'll hear us talk about pavement condition and PCN numbers of that nature. And earlier in my presentation, I talked about the asset management project that we were doing, and we're kind of looking at all of our streets, and we're looking at assigning new PCN numbers or pavement condition numbers. And we kind of rate all of our streets, on a scale of, 10 being the worst of the worst, and 100 being an excellent condition. But that's just one factor that we use when we're looking at resurfacing our streets. We also will look at the traffic and how much traffic patterns and what kind of volume those streets have. If you kind of think about it, even if you had 2 streets that were both in poor condition, but one street is seeing 10 cars a day and another street is seeing 200 cars a day, that 200 car street is going to take a higher priority than the 10 car street. We look at, input from our street maintenance staff. These are the guys that are out in the streets every day. It's boots on the road, as we like to say, and they're out there filling potholes, and they're looking at our different cracks and crack seals and things of that nature. And they report back to our pavement management group and what they're seeing out in the streets. Sometimes we'll notice that a certain street that was been resurfaced is deteriorating faster than some of our other streets. And maybe the PCN classification needs revised because, what we're seeing from our maintenance staff and our inspectors, they're out there on the streets every day. We also do take public input. So, that is important. If you call 311 and you're reporting potholes and you're talking about streets that need resurfaced, then it allows us to track that data. And we use that in our formula when we're looking at streets to be resurfaced. How many potholes have been on that street or been reported on that street? How many requests have we had for resurfacing? And we go out and investigate all those 311, I don't call them complaints, but inquiries about what we're doing with some of our resurfacing program. We also look at the age of the street. When was it last resurfaced? Typically we like to get 20 to 25 years out of our streets before we need to resurface them again. So we keep a database, it's an internal database, and all 2,100 center lane miles of streets throughout, and we know when that street was last resurfaced. So we take that into consideration. And we also try to not just look at one area even, we try to distribute our resurfacing program throughout the city. And I bring that up in 2 cases. We're not just going to look at all the poor streets in this one area where we can, maybe hit 10, 15, 20 different poor streets in multiple areas throughout the city. And we actually try to group those streets together in these packages. So, just because one street might be poor and the next street over is fair, but it's due to be resurfaced in a couple years, we might bundle those in this package to do them together because we're already there. And it makes sense for us to do those 2 streets. And actually, it saves the city money in the long run because the contractor's there. You don't have to mobilize them to another part of the city, and we can actually do more with less money. And we'll also look at other departments. As you noticed in my presentation earlier, is, we'll work with utilities, we'll work with development, and we'll do kind of what we call as conflict detection. So if we know that the utilities in 2 years is going to be doing a water line project on a certain street, but we have it scheduled for resurfacing this year, we might hold off a couple of years and do that resurfacing project when utility does their water line project, just because we don't want to resurface the street with 2 years later, utilities is going to come and tear it up to put a water line. So we do that conflict detection, and we take that into account when we're looking at our resurfacing program. And of course, as we mentioned before, funding level is a consideration. So we can only get to a certain point with the money that we're allocated. It does limit the total number of streets that we're able to do in a year. But it's a consideration that we have to take into account. As far as our sidewalk program, I guess what we try to do is look at different ways that we can fund sidewalks throughout the city. I mean, what we try to do is we'll fund them with our capital program. We also will look at when we're doing these major roadway projects, like a Hudson or a State Route 161 or a Sullivan Avenue, something like that. When we're doing a major street reconstruction, we're not just looking at the street curb to curb and replacing what's needed within there. We're doing a complete street kind of approach. So we're looking at, let alone doing curbs, streets, gutters, ADA curb ramps, but we'll also put in sidewalks in a lot of those projects too. So that helps us fund those projects in the long run, as well as a lot of those bigger projects that we have like that is we get a lot of funding partners through MORPC or through OPWC. We'll also utilize some of our Safe Routes to Schools grant money that we get yearly from the Ohio Department of Transportation, or the state, I guess, as well as some of the money that was funded for our schools program or Operation Safe Watch program that was, thanks to council, put into our budget a couple years ago. As well as, we'll look at urban infrastructure recovery dollars also. It's an important enough project in one of our communities that they'll raise it on their URF funding levels to put in sidewalks. So that's always a good source of funding for us. And we also, at private developments, if you look at new developments that's going on around the city, this could be a new housing development or some other new development, we're requiring them to put sidewalks in. We're not just, it's a part of their development and they need to provide that to us. Some of the things, again, we look at is vehicular traffic, 311 service requests. We look at, the opportunity areas and really concentrating on putting sidewalks in those areas. We look for the presence of, when we're doing our investigation, of worn paths that are on the side of the roadway and the berms, to see that we are getting a lot of foot traffic on those roads, that people are wearing paths in the grass or in the berms of the median. So we took that into consideration. Of course, again, the district-wide school plans and travel plans for Safe Routes to School. We look at the MORPC database for pedestrian crashes also, and we look for those high-level areas that might have those crashes. That's a consideration when we're doing sidewalks. And finally, we look at, where are people going? The destinations of interest, such as rec centers, libraries in the area, food stores, senior centers, shopping centers, or Medicare locations, things of that nature. And we try to concentrate, putting those sidewalks where people are trying to get to also.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you so much. We are now moving on to our final presentation. Director Paul Rakowski of the Recreation and Parks Department. And you are the lucky recipient of a Facebook question, which I will pull up in a second here. Why don't you start with your presentation, then I'll ask you the question.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Brown, President Harden, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to briefly talk a little bit about our 2020 capital budget. Department of Recreation and Parks will receive $26.8 million to acquire, develop new parks and greenways to improve existing parks and renovate facilities. So just a few examples of this work in action include spending $1.4 million on the acquisition of new parkland and trails, following up on our 2020 purchase of two former school sites. In 2021, the department will design for a new community creative campus and park located on Columbus's Near East Side. This campus will become the future home of Martin Janis and the Golden Hobby programming. Columbus Recreation Parks owns and manages over 120 miles of the region's vast trail network, and the $3.3 billion in 2020 funded projects will further advance the Olentangy, Camp Chase, Big Walnut, Alum Creek, and Scioto trails. New parks are points of connection for health, well-being, and recreation, and never has this been more evident than how communities have relied on them during the pandemic. We will be spending $1.2 million to support the development of new parks in growing areas of Columbus. Two such parks are West Case Park in the northwest and Gender Road Park in the southeast, both communities where residents are living outside the reach of a park. A robust community engagement process to support the master planning for these parks will begin in 2021. These new park developments add to a diverse system of over 400 Columbus parks. Annually, $9.7 million, about half of the department's capital budget, is dedicated to the care of our existing facilities and parks, such as the renovation or replacement of facilities, playgrounds, shelters, and sports courts. Federal grant funding of nearly $2.5 million will make possible major improvements at an additional 11 parks in lower-income neighborhoods of Columbus. $3.1 million will be spent on existing roof, building envelope, and HVAC improvements to community centers, shelter houses, and athletic complexes. 2020 capital funds will also allow the department to begin the design process for replacing Windsor Pool in South Linden, originally built in 1965, and Glenwood Pool, built in 1972 and located in the Hilltop neighborhood. 2021 will be the first full year of implementation of the Columbus Urban Forestry Master Plan. $2.3 million, nearly 3 times the amount of an average year of funding, provides the focused investment in data collection, equipment, site preparation, and tree plantings that respond to the plan's recommendations. Columbus's park system serves nearly 1 million residents across the city. We prioritize our capital budget based on parks and facility conditions and gaps in existing services, with particular attention to underserved neighborhoods. This ensures that all residents can reap the benefit of recreational opportunities that our parks and trails offer. Recreation and Parks supports the mayor's equity agenda, not only by investing in low and moderate income neighborhoods or those which lack access to parks, but also by spending nearly 31% of our 2020 funding allocation in opportunity neighborhoods. I'd like to thank council, the mayor's office, and the finance department for all the hard work on the capital budget. We're very happy to receive what we did this year, and we're very excited to get these projects all up and running. So with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Director Rakowski, for that update. Actually, 2 things came in on Facebook for you. First was, first was just to shout out Matt Smido, sorry, not you, about how good the information on the Hilltop Early Learning Center has been with the community out there in the Hilltop. But the question that came in for you was about the Camp Chase Valley View Bike Trail Connector. And this person was asking a question just to get an update on how that's going. How how that investment is going. Do you have one, or should we follow up with him?
Why don't we follow up, President Pro Tem Brown, because we took all of your questions from the commission, the area commissions, and we're putting those all into a spreadsheet for you so that we could provide you updates on all of those projects where we had questions. I know there was one on Glenwood Park that came earlier today that James passed on to me. I will let you know that we're entering into a $22,000 contract right now with Resource International, and they're going to be our engineering environmental consultant to take a look at that whole park area. And then we have $200,000 set aside in future funding to go and implement those recommendations so that we can open up that park down below the recreation center and put some neat amenities in there, but doing that in a way that protects some of the really important natural attributes of that park. Because, you know, it does lie low. There's vernal pools in that park. It could very well at this point have some wetland activity down there. But I wanted to let you know that we are moving forward with that project. That was a very specific question someone asked.
Great. Thank you so much, Director. Are there any other questions from my colleagues for Director? All right. Well, seeing none, I really want to thank my colleagues for being here today, and Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Dorrance, Councilmember Favor, Council President Hardin, and Councilmember Remy. I really appreciate you working quickly with us to dig into this proposed capital budget, given the administration's request for the November 23rd bond sale, given the timeline that COVID has presented. I really want to thank the department staff for giving 2 hours of their time today on this Monday, when we'll be seeing many of you also this evening for more hours of your time. So thank you for doing that while making sandwiches. And I also just want to remind everyone that we hope next year to be back to our usual roadshow out in the neighborhoods, being able to talk about our investments with constituents live in person. But that in the meantime requires all of us to do what we can in our personal lives and make the right choices, to wear our masks, to not congregate with people unless necessary. And I just got a notice on my phone that Governor DeWine is addressing what the newspaper called our spiraling COVID cases. I hate to end on this somber note, but we will not be able to get back to normal in Columbus, or to find our new normal, to be able to congregate again and have these conversations about public investment in person, until we all work together to get a hold of this virus. And we obviously need leadership to do its part too. But we implore anyone who's listening to continue to keep community spread top of mind and to do what we can to help. A few notes just before we close out here. The capital improvement budget will be heard at tonight's council meeting. It will be tabled, and we will have final consideration again next Monday, November 16th, in preparation for the 23rd bond sale. I really want to thank Matt Erickson in our Legislative Research Office for his hard work on preparing council members to consider this proposed budget. And I want to thank the Finance Office, and particularly Kyle Severhart, of course, Rob Newman in absentia as well, for their very hard work to prepare this with departments. We know that the task was different this year. Thank you to Kelsey Ellingson and James Carmine in my office for their work to make this hearing happen. For anyone who's listening, just a reminder, you can always reach out to us at council to ask questions. You can ask, tune in virtually tonight for the council meeting, as well as we will be hearing the first read of the budget. So before I sign off, I would like to just quickly, any of my colleagues, council members Dorans, Favor, or Brown, have anything you'd like to add at the end here? Okay, great. Well, thank you again for everyone's participation. We are excited in these about these physical investments for the betterment of our city. And see you all later today.